So last month, I decided to go out on my own.
Nick, thank you for being here, man.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
I see you around all the time. I've seen you around the club. I see you playing ball. And I asked you to come on, but I know you're a busy man.
Busy, I live far away.
You live far away too. You live way out there in Kamakura.
Exactly.
And you love it. Are you always posting those pictures of you on the beach with your dog?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm blessed.
Rufus is kicking it?
Yeah, Rufus. We have two dogs. We have Soma and Rufus. Soma she's like 3 kilos. She doesn't want to.
All right. Is she a poodle as well?
She's a poodle. She's a rescue as well. She does not like to walk with me.
Now you said she's a rescuer?
She's a rescue. A rescue.
Both of
them are rescue. Yeah.
Is that right?
Soma was rescued from making a bunch of babies, and Rufus was supposed to make babies. We got her at like 9 years old.
Okay.
So she had gone through a lot of trauma and stuff. You know, she's a bit skittish. Rufus was 7 months when we got him, before he was actually pressed in the service, so to speak.
Okay.
So we adopted them, and we all live in Kamakura. Soma is my wife's dog, essentially. She loves me, but she loves me in her way. Right. Rufus loves us both, but he loves to take walks, to go outside. When I get up and literally go get some water, he's ready, like, are we going outside? Are we going outside? So it's an interesting dynamic between the two of them.
So you don't have kids?
No, my wife and I do not. I have a daughter from a previous relationship.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
My daughter lives in New York, and my sister's in Atlanta at this point. But yeah, they have a really good relationship.
Now, is your sister older or younger than you?
She's older. She's 8 years older. We have different moms.
So is it only the two? Wait, you have different moms?
Yep. So my dad was married before.
But how many children did he have?
He was his child from the first marriage. Okay. And I'm his from the second marriage.
So there's only the two of you?
There's two of us, yes.
Okay. Now your mother obviously had one, and her mother only had one.
Yeah, we believe so. Yeah. So my weird story.
It's interesting.
There's history there, but my dad and her mom they separated, and then my sister eventually came to live with his second wife, my mother, and me.
Oh, so
we grew up like she came to us when she was I want to say 9 or 10, and so I was 1 or 2 when she came to live with us.
So you always
my big sister's always been my big sister. You know, even though she's my stepsister, but she's always been my sister Kim.
When did you realize she was your stepsister?
Well, we always talked about it. You know,
growing up.
Growing up, yeah, there was never a secret. It was never hidden.
Right,
yeah, it was just always like, yeah, you know, you and your sister look a little bit different because she had a different mom than you did. Yeah, and my sister's mom is Korean, so that's the wrinkle. You know, I looked at my sister, I'm like, why is she? Her hair's a little bit straighter than mine in certain places. So
and I wish my hair was straight.
Well, yeah, my hair looked like it hurt back in the day, man.
Come on, all black kids, man, all black kids. And it did for little girls, because my sisters, I remember them having their hair pressed and stuff, and the pain that would cause them.
Yes.
Because you had to try to assimilate.
Oh, yeah.
You had to try to assimilate. But luckily, being a little boy, you had your flat tops, your Covadises and stuff like that.
Yeah, you get a Caesar or something.
You went to the barber. Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting, Nick. So tell me, so you grew up, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago.
Chicago, okay.
Was born and raised on the south side of Chicago for the first 4 years of my life, 4 or 5 years. And we moved to a suburb right adjacent, like butting up against the south side of the city. So when you tell people like I grew up in Blue Island, the name of the suburb, it's basically an extension of the south side of Chicago. Okay. You know, you drive 15 minutes, you're downtown Chicago. And my family's mostly on the south side, so I spent most of my weekends and summers with my grandmother.
Now, is Chicago's where they have the L train?
Yes, the L train is, it runs to parts of the south side, you know, west, north.
Now, I went to Chicago in 1970. I rode there from LA to New York, but on the way to New York, I stopped in Chicago. I was on a motorcycle.
Okay, wow.
Me and another brother.
Wow.
And the guy's place we stopped at, his younger brothers lived down the street from us, and he had a restaurant. Now Chicago is Gangsterville. It always was.
Yeah, always has been.
Always has. I mean, it was seriously gangster, and it was still there. Remnants of that. So we went to his bar, and I never forgot this. And I started training my staff kind of like this. We went in the bar, and I said, "Is Bubba here?" And she said, "Who's asking?"
Right.
I said, "Tell Bubba that Lance Lee knows his brother Michael and Barry from Halldale Avenue in Los Angeles." She said, "Okay, stay right here." They wouldn't even let us in.
Right.
She gets on the phone. She comes back. Bubba pulls up and what do you have? An Excalibur or something?
Oh, Excalibur.
Oh no, he was pimping, man. This cat was serious.
That's the classic car right there.
This cat, man. But you couldn't ride a car like that unless you had some serious backup.
In certain
Especially
areas,
in Chicago.
yes.
No, you wouldn't be pulling.
And being a black man as well.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You knew. And he had a white Excalibur with the pipes on the
side
side and everything.
in the spare tire. Yeah, it's a beautiful car.
Right in the back?
Yes.
Chicago. So what was it like growing up there? Because I'm from LA.
Right. And
you grew up in what years? You grew up in the...
So I'm 49 this year, so I was born in 75.
Okay.
And grew up in the 70s, through the 80s and the 90s, So I saw, Chicago and the area transform from, being Chicago and kind of rough city through, and then the gentrification was one thing that happened, and it continued to happen. And then, the drug epidemic, in the U.S., the crack epidemic.
That's right. That hit when, the 80s?
Yeah, early 80s.
It's really hard in the 80s.
Yeah,
throughout the U.S., yeah.
Yeah, throughout the U.S., and and obviously Chicago's not immune. It's a big city. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of organized crime. No matter what race, there's always gangs there forever. And one memory, I would say, two memories, at least for me, growing up where I did. There's a lot of gangs, right? Like just a lot of street gangs, like kids, being bored and stuff.
Did you ever get involved with
Nah, man, I was a square. I studied. I played sports,
but
so
you had
people
to
leave me
go
alone.
through it. I know it was like for me as a little kid.
You were affiliated in terms of the neighborhood you grew up in. If people saw you and say, yeah.
And didn't you have to say the right thing?
You had to say the right thing, or you didn't wear your hat, because we have a whole thing about wearing your hat to one side or the other. That's a big thing.
You didn't have the Crips and the Bloods like
no.
We did in the East West Coast. But I didn't grow up with that. We grew up with the Gladiators and the Slawsons.
Okay.
And the sign was, if you're a Gladiator, you had to have this sign.
Okay.
If you're a Slawson, it was this.
Okay.
And if you put up the wrong sign in the wrong area,
yep.
It was a problem.
Right.
You better be fast on your feet.
And I spent a lot of time in LA, and I have family in Pasadena, so I know LA quite well. So it's a similar mentality or similar way of growing up, right? And you asked me how I grew up. I grew up with two parents at home who prized education in a black enclave of a suburb of Chicago. So it was a lot of working class folks. We all played sports together, we all hung out. People's moms saw you as their son and vice versa.
Oh,
we had a good community. But there was obviously stuff you had to watch out for. And I remember seeing guys getting beaten up, bloody, face bloodied, from gang stuff. Speaking of drugs, I had a friend whose house behind me got raided, like during Christmas break. I was at my grandmother's house in the city watching the news, and I'm like, that looks like our neighborhood. That looks like our block. And then they went to the block behind me and they raided my friend's house because his dad was selling drugs.
In Chicago, do they have alleys?
Oh yeah, we have alleys. Yes.
Because some places don't.
Yes,
right.
we do.
But you actually have the cars can go down.
The cars can go down because a lot of times in Chicago, when you have a single family home or duplex, your garage is facing the alley.
Exactly.
So you pull into the alley that way.
Right. You come in that way and you come in the back. Same in
exactly.
where I grew up.
Yes.
We all had alleys. You had the Main Street alley. So
exactly right. Yes. And that's where your trash cans and everything.
Right. And all the trash trucks come down the alley.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So again, South Central parts of LA look very, very similar to Chicago.
Okay.
It like when I drive through parts of LA, I'm like, it looks just like parts of Chicago to me.
Right.
Same kind of restaurants, same kind of people. Like you said, the way the houses look and everything, the layout.
Right.
So it's very similar.
But you have more red bricks and stuff like that homes, because California's more
wood, exactly right.
and stuff
it's
like
too
that.
cold.
Stucco.
Yeah, it's too cold for us to have.
Right, to have that.
Just to have it, because it's minus 1,000 degrees in the winter.
Then you guys, your homeless would be a little bit different than it would be in California, because they tend to be around warmer areas.
They do, but we do have a lot of homeless.
Survive? How can they survive then?
So they have a lot of homeless shelters. They try to get people off the streets and protect them that way. Also, if you think about big cities, they have the grates on the ground.
Right.
And a lot of steam is coming out of there, so people would
get right
over there, or go into abandoned factories and stuff like that, and maybe set a bonfire and things burn down, and
Isn't it sad that you had to grow up in that, man? And
it's hard.
Get out of that. So let me tell. So growing up through school, okay, you made it through that. What kind of work did your father and mother do?
So my father was kind of a jack of all trades. So he drove a charter bus for a long time, meaning taking groups of folks from Chicago area to go gambling in Wisconsin or someplace or Dakotas. He would then take a racing team, who was doing stock cars and stuff like that. He would take them to wherever they need to go race. He took the Globetrotters around all the time. I met the Globetrotters. He used to drive for the Bulls back in the day. Mel Tillis was a country singer. Ray Charles, Neil Diamond. A bunch of people he's driven. George Wallace, comedian.
Wow.
So I met a lot of different celebrities. And that's what he did for his full-time job mostly. And then he was also a contractor on the side. He's a very handy guy.
A lot of black guys learned how to do carpentry, masonry. They were really good that way. They had to be.
And speaking of masonry, my dad was a great mason. He was
he
beautiful.
a mason?
He was very good at stoneworking, not
Stonework.
not Masonic.
He didn't really become a Masonic.
No.
So your father was not a Mason?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, he had friends, who were Masons.
Right. So did my
friends
father.
at Elks, and all those kind of groups.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So a lot of commonality here, but yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it would have to be.
We're
both Americans. We're both Americans.
Yeah.
So from there. And there's a lot of stuff we could talk about, because one thing I like to tell people all the time, they ask me, why is it that I don't want to live in America? Because I'll tell them I don't. And I start off I preface all of that by saying, first of all, I love my country with all my heart. I'd give my life to protect my country, right? However, I can't live there because it's too traumatic for me. So tell me, growing up, when you were in elementary school, when you were starting elementary school, were you more academic or were you sports-minded?
I like sports. I was a late bloomer in sports. So I was academic in that I didn't start really getting serious about academics and getting good grades until like junior high school and high school. I was good at school. I got bored easily in my elementary school. So I would finish my work first and bother the other kids and do stuff because I was bored.
Wait, so your parents had started reading to you really young? When you were
my mom and dad were voracious readers. Okay. So we had always had a ton of books at the house.
That's interesting.
My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, loved her grandchildren and great-grandchildren more than she loved her own children. And not in a bad way. I'm saying she doted on us and gave us books about history, African-American history especially. We have family who are Japanese through marriage on my mom's side. So I have a very mixed family. And she would come to Japan and bring back books for us about that stuff. She had friends who lived in Spain. We get books about that. So we were always reading. Our gifts at Christmas was, some socks, a nice sweater maybe, and a bunch of books.
Oh, that is beautiful.
I got toys, obviously, but my grandmother and my mom and dad were always like, book, read.
Did your father come from a big family?
Yes, I think, if I get this right, because I always confuse this. My dad came from about 9, I want to say, a family of 9. And my mom's family was a family of 7 or 8, if I remember correctly.
Now, were they born and raised in Chicago, or did they come from the South, like a lot of blacks did?
Good question. My dad's family, him and his brother and sisters were all born in Pittsburgh, outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
They migrated his mom is from Alabama, his dad is from Virginia, originally, and they migrated up. My mom's family, most of them grew up in Chicago. But they came from Ohio, but a lot of them were Creole and migrated up. And so
they were from Louisiana?
Louisiana, yes. They migrated up from Louisiana.
That's
Kentucky, and then Ohio, and then Chicago.
Exactly.
And they were also hustlers, so I'll talk about it if you want to talk about it later, but go ahead.
My father's from Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay, yep.
And I always wanted to go, and he used to tickle me. I mean, I have 2 younger sisters and an older brother. Through elementary school, you were very academic. You were a late bloomer when it came to sports.
Sports, yeah.
And what sports did you start to adapt to when you got did you have any that you liked?
I did. We played a lot of baseball, like in the neighborhood, because I grew up in a suburban area. We had a lot of fields and stuff as well, so we had a lot of outdoor stuff. Baseball, we played obviously basketball. Played a lot of football because the Bears are popular and all that stuff. So I kind of, the first organized sport I did play was football.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you were a big kid, weren't you?
I was chubby, yeah. I was chubby, man. So I started out as a lineman.
Too, weren't you?
I was tall. I was a bit tall for my age.
Compared to your kids?
Yeah. So I started out as a lineman. I was blocking. I was a proud lineman, but I stretched out and then played receiver later on. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you got a little lean. So you
got a little lean. I could, I wasn't the fastest dude. I could run good routes. I can catch.
Okay.
So, but the one claim to fame in high school football was I was always the guy with the highest grade point average. And perfect attendance, because they would give out awards during the season, right? Some dudes would be like, most touchdowns or catches or whatever. They'd be like,
and they didn't teach you about that?
Of course they did. Now, my mom worked for Leo Burnett, which is a global ad agency, for 40 years.
When you reach for the stars, you may not get one, but you won't come up with a handful of mud either.
There you go. Reach for the stars was their motto. She worked there for 30 years. She's not 40 years. She's not that old. She's passed away, but I was
and your father too. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, they both passed away. My dad in 2012 while I was here, and then my mom a few years later while I was here as well. So it just. Wow. It was 1-2, but they had a good life.
That's good.
They taught me a lot.
They stayed together too.
They did. That's
good.
It's peaks and troughs, man. I'm being married for 21 years myself. It's peaks and troughs.
So. With anybody,
yeah.
Partnerships, any type of partnership. If you don't have them, you don't have a partnership.
Right. Yeah.
So go on. So you said
because you mentioned Marlboro, and my mom worked for Leo Burnett, and Marlboro was one of their big clients forever. And so we used to get free Marlboros all the time. And my dad smoked? Both of my parents smoked at one point. My mom stopped when I was in high school. My dad continued. And I didn't smoke. You said people, see they mimic what they see or they tend to. Right. I didn't smoke because
You tried once.
I tried and I hated it, but also I didn't really know what smoke smelled like until I left and went to college and came back my first semester.
Why, your parents never smoked around you?
No, they smoked in the house. My house smelled like smoke. Everything smelled like, I did not know what smoke smelled like. I thought that's the way things
That's
smell.
what they smell. I hear you.
I brought back my clothes to wash, and I washed them, and I get it back to school. I'm like, good Lord, what's going on? My clothes. I'm like, oh, that's what smoke smells like. I know it sounds naive right now for me to say, but yeah.
But that emphasizes the point that you make. You can be in an environment and you think things are that way, and they're really not.
Yeah.
I remember the reason why I didn't want to smoke. I remember my father in the 50s, like we were growing up, born in 52, and let's say 56 or so, and we'd be in his 52 Plymouth, and those roll-up windows, and the stick shift here, and I remember he would start smoking in the car, and I'd watch the smoke come.
Yep.
And there were no seat belts.
Oh, yes.
And I would get lower and lower and lower, and he wouldn't say anything, and I'd want to crack the window, but it'd be too cold, and I'd be down here and the smoke's coming up. I said, please, because I hated it. I couldn't breathe. I could not breathe.
I was hotboxed for years by my father in the car like that.
Is that what it's called?
It's called a hotbox, yeah. We would drive from Chicago to Pittsburgh, right? It's about an 8-hour drive. You stop a long way. And he's just smoking the whole time. And it's cold sometimes, like you said.
Right.
And I'm trying to like crack window. He's like,
No,
you better close that window back up. What are you doing? It's cold outside. And I'm just like, my little lungs are just getting abused, just getting punched. I smoked for years. Sorry, sidebar, but yeah.
No, it's not interesting. Very similar. I think you're the closest person I've ever spoke to that has similar relationships in their life than I did. I've talked to other black people on the podcast, but not as similar as this. You get into high school. Did you have anything that you're really focusing on that you liked academically? Any subjects?
I was really good at STEM, so science, math. I got good at it, right? I enjoyed science. I liked learning. I was always had a quest for new information. And math, I struggled with in certain, like algebra I struggled with, but once I got to geometry and trigonometry and physics and stuff and calculus, it just clicked for some reason. And then I had an affinity for languages. My whole thing was, I have Japanese family. I always saw them come to Chicago and visit. And I see my cousins speaking to their mom who's Japanese, in Japanese. I'm like, that's cool, I want to do that. In my high school, we had Spanish classes. We had Japanese, we got Japanese later on. So I studied Spanish initially for the first 2 years. In my third year, I was like, I want to do Japanese. But it was the same time as Spanish. And I didn't want to give up Spanish because that was my love. And so I did not take Japanese then, went through Spanish the whole time. I graduated, and this is not me bragging, I'm just saying, out of, however many kids were in our class, I graduated number 4 in my class.
In Spanish?
No, just in
number 4, period.
Number 4, period.
Only academically.
Yeah, academically. So I was switched on then, right? I played sports. I, had a decent life.
What was the makeup of your school ethnically wise?
Just like Chicago, so it's 30% black, 30% white, 30% Hispanic.
Is it?
And 10% Asian. So we say Asian, like you count Indian folks in there, Chinese family, there's Filipino. Yeah, so.
What was your clique like?
Playing sports, you kind of hang with everybody, right? So I had a very diverse group of friends. But in saying that, when it comes to lunchtime, it's very, very segregated.
Was it?
Yeah,
People
it's still the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, you had
several
tables of black folks.
You picked your groups.
You had a table with a lot of Latinos at another table. Then we had, being the Midwest, we had a Nazi problem. We've always had a Nazi problem. So some of my friends, after sophomore year of high school, they became skinheads.
Is that right?
So they had the skinhead tables, and then you had the table of people with no friends. And I'm going to say weirdos because that's what we called them back then. That was wrong. But people with no friends, or people didn't really have a clique, they kind of hung by themselves. So it was just very, very segregated kind of lunch thing. And once in a while, football guys would get together, or a basketball team would sit together and talk and stuff. But most of the time, it was along racial or color lines.
And did you abide by that kind of?
You did, yeah, you did. I mean, I would see some friends and say, "Hey, I would never ignore anybody." But when you sat at a certain place.
But you couldn't. You would actually, if you went over there to sit with the Hispanic group or the Asian group,
I think
you might be able to do it once, just for a second.
Yeah, I would go hang out with them for a bit, but certain people would say something to me about going over there.
What's up, yeah?
Well, why are you going over there?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Why you going to sit over there? I'm like, well, because I know those guys and they're good people.
You better have a good excuse.
Yeah. So it was interesting upbringing. But so just getting back to academically, science and math, I was good at. I love physics. I had a really good physics teacher, Mr. Natonic, and languages. So when I went to university, I went to Marquette in Milwaukee. I went to become an engineer, a civil engineer. That's what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to do. Because I had no idea what.
Did they give you that list where it showed the jobs and the income that you can make? Did you
They
get one of
got
those?
that, and we get like
You
what
did?
color's your parachute and all this kind of these different books you get and everything. And I'm like, okay. So honestly, Lance, before I went to Marquette, I applied for the Air Force Academy because I wanted to fly planes and I liked science.
Okay, all right.
My dad being an ex-Army guy, a lot of my family being ex-Navy.
But he was
and Marines.
Korean War, right?
No, my dad was Vietnam War.
I'm Vietnam.
Okay, yeah. He was,
I got drafted. That's why I enlisted.
my dad was in Vietnam War, yeah. He was there from 65 to 69.
Do you know what year he was born?
44.
Your father was in Vietnam.
Yep, my dad was in Vietnam, and I had
He
uncles.
actually went to Nam?
Yes. And he was in Vietnam. He was in Korea a bit. That's why he met my sister's mom there.
Okay.
My dad also lived here for a few years as well. Wow. So I have a connection to Asia, just strangely. But I was gonna say is I was gonna go to Air Force Academy and fly jets, right? And I got a little bit too tall, you know.
In those days.
Yeah, in those
that's
days,
right.
yeah. And then my dad was like, "You're good at academics and stuff, but you don't like authority. You're not gonna do well in the military." And I'm
He
like,
could see that.
He could see it because I don't like being told what to do,
Hear you.
especially if I know what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
I don't need people beat me over the head. And I had that upbringing with him, right? He was an ex-military guy, so I got some of those.
So he was like a
types of
commander to you, but
Yeah.
but it was very clear where he was at. You didn't challenge him, did you?
No, I could not. I could not.
You knew better.
When I got older, and because the child becomes the adult at a certain
Okay.
point.
So
you
what
know,
happened?
you start.
When did it happen? When did it happen for you?
When we moved back from California, this was like I would say 2007.
What do you mean we moved back from California? You'd moved to California?
So my wife and I lived here for a number of years.
Oh, you're talking about you and your wife?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Probably edit that out. But we lived in California, then we moved back to Chicago. Megumi and I did. And I was 10, 15 minutes away from my parents by distance.
How old are you now?
This is 2007, so I was 32,
Okay.
33.
All right.
And he was getting in later stages of his life and being a little bit more immature sometimes in the way he acted,
How old was he? 70 something?
So, no, he was because he died at 69. I want to
Okay,
say.
so he's still in the 60s, early 60s?
Yeah, early 60s. Yeah, early 60s. And I would have to kind of tell him, hey man, calm down.
Well, what do you do? Like what?
He always had a temper, and I have a temper as well. But he would get mad at the littlest things. Like we'd be out in public, and like let's say the person at Home Depot
Oh, and you get upset with them?
would get with them and just kind of make a scene. And I'm like, Dad, you can just talk to them and learn how to negotiate.
And what did he say?
He's like, no, motherfucker, come bring my shit. No. He would get mad, like
He really mad?
mad. My father had a
like he's
crazy
going to
temper.
put up his ear.
Oh, he was just burn down your store. He's not gonna physically harm. He's just burn the store down. My father was a
Really?
wild man. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, what number child was he? In his family. Do you know where he ranked? Was he
4?
4? What do you have above him, girls or boys?
Mostly, one boy and rest girls, and he was kind of the de facto, leader. He was kind of put in charge. And that's a whole nother podcast episode right there.
I hear you.
That's a whole other podcast episode.
Because I find you have a family dynamic, and I work with kids.
Right.
And I can tell what you're going to be like depending upon how you ranked in your family. Were you the only child? Did you have an older sister, older brother?
Right.
How many years difference? Because usually if there's more than 3 years difference, you're not close. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult unless your parents know how to do it or you have a very strong religious background.
Right.
Like Mormons do really good that way. But they tend to put them really close and they have 5 and sometimes more.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But your father had a temper.
Oh,
you knew
I
as a
have it
kid.
too.
Was he corporal? I mean, in his raising with you? Do
You know what?
remember
My dad didn't spank me a lot. My mom spanked me more earlier.
But were they real spankings?
They weren't beatings. Like my friends would get destroyed. I would like,
They come back.
They couldn't walk.
They would look like Denzel.
My friends couldn't walk.
I know
man.
what you mean. They'd use the cord.
The cord or a
cell phone
switch or
cord
something. No. My mom would hit me with a wooden spoon when she's cooking. I'm messing around, just on my hand or something. Just get me out of there.
Right.
My dad was more of a verbal disciplinarian.
That was enough, right?
Oh. He would cut your clothes off you basically verbally, man. I'd be crying because he would just
He knew how to
he'd break you
destroy you.
down.
He'd break you down.
So when I play football, going forward, people yell at me, I'm laughing at the coach.
yeah, see,
and
that's
other
all
guys
you
are
got.
crying because the coach yelling at them, calling them, other names and stuff. And I'm like, that's all you
got?
got? That's all you got? So my dad did not know how to negotiate people after a certain point. He would get mad because he had a very strong sense of right and wrong, and felt like, if he's asking for something politely, you should be able to, give it to him what he wants politely, and within reason. But people weren't doing what he wanted. My father would lose it, and I'd be like, whoa, come on, Dad, chill.
So when did you realize that you were really, okay, now you can handle him? Or you weren't afraid of him anymore?
I hadn't been afraid of him for a while.
You hadn't been afraid of, you'd been kind of.
I was afraid of him up until probably my late teens, early 20s, definitely. Because he was still working.
He wouldn't say he'd do anything, but you knew that if he had to go that far,
my father,
you'd lose.
He could handle himself.
Right. But I'm just saying, but you knew if you went too far, you probably wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't. No,
nobody would.
He knew a lot more than I did about how to handle himself. Because he went through the military and stuff, and everything. So no, but like my late 20s, early 30s, I kind of knew. I was like, I got to kind of step in, because he would argue with my mom about stupid stuff.
Were you taller than him?
We're basically the same height. I'm bigger than him though.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That was my buddy, man. That was my buddy.
But you have to turn around. My father never touched me, but he touched my older brothers.
Right.
He didn't have to touch me. He could look at me wrong, and I said, "Okay, I'm good.
I'm good. I don't need to." My sister got the brunt of it.
He was quiet. My father was quiet.
Okay.
That's scary.
Yes. So that smoldering.
When he blew up. Oh man.
I remember coming home. He would come home from work, and we were sitting down at the dinner table eating, and it was just the tension.
You could feel it.
You could feel it, and somebody starts laughing because it's just nervous energy, right? And he'd get mad.
He'd be mad at that.
He'd be mad at me. It's funny to look back on.
You know what I mean?
But now
at that time,
it was
tense.
Yeah,
it was traumatic.
It was. But yeah, that was my buddy, man. I love my parents dearly. They taught me a lot, and I'm fortunate to have had them as parents.
That's right. Well, you decide. I believe we all choose how we were going to come back, or whatever, and who we have and stuff. Because obviously you're still here, so he didn't do such a bad job.
No,
he couldn't have. But you had to interpret it the right way, because a lot of people don't make it through this.
And my dad's, I still hear two refrains from him. One, Nick, the Lord protects fools and babies. You're not a baby, so which one are you?
Ooh.
When I make mistakes. And he was like, don't walk around out here like Joe Sausagehead.
Joe Sausagehead?
Yeah.
Who was that?
And I was like, who is Joe Sausagehead? He's like, well, it's the guy, we used to call this one dude Joe Sausagehead in the neighborhood, because, people just hit him in the head and take whatever they wanted from him, or do whatever they wanted. And he would just let them,
do it. Yeah,
let him do it. He would give it. Yeah. And he was like, don't be like that. Because I was Mr. Turn the Other Cheek at one point.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Because I grew up in an area where we fought. School bus drops us off. Everybody gets off the school bus, drop your bags. There's somebody fist fighting every day in elementary school. Every single day.
Did you have any of those?
Oh, a bunch. I lost a lot more than I won, but I did not back down from
right.
conflict at all.
Because you couldn't. You'd be a punk.
Yeah, no. I got definitely taken my fair share of licks. That's why I have a decent sense of humor.
You see this? Junior high school.
Okay.
2 times, man. 2 weeks apart. My father never saw it. Never noticed it. I didn't want him to see it.
But I think we all need to get those licks sometimes, because it lets you know where you stand and how to interact.
See, they don't have any rite of passage anymore for kids.
We did.
For boys.
Yeah.
And it used to be when you became 21. But as a black kid, you get it from being in the neighborhood. If you come from the kind of neighborhood, first of all, you learn to play the dozens. Did you guys?
Of course. That's all we did.
And
if you got mad, then you lost. You can't.
Or if you started, after
fisticuffs, you lost.
Because those guys have
what I mean.
Say they want to start fighting.
Yes, that's right.
Right. But you talk about each other and say your mother's so black, man. She was night school. And they always mark her absent.
Right. Exactly.
You remember that one?
Yeah.
You never be the man your mother was.
Your mama told she owes Jesus $1. Just looking back now.
We were hard, man.
That's the way you grew up, though.
But you didn't know you were being prepared.
No. You
didn't know you were being prepared. You're just thinking, okay, now how am I going to handle this cat? Because he's going to come at me again.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't have a retort,
you're punk.
You just get. You
don't want to be a punk.
People pile on you, man.
That's right.
Yeah, no. You always got to fight back.
Okay, so you finish high school. You wanted to go into college. So you went into college to study what?
So I wanted to become a civil engineer.
Civil engineer, right?
Because I liked.
But you did want to go into the Air Force too.
I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy,
right.
and
but you were too tall.
I was too tall and didn't like authority. And so I went to Marquette because they gave me a bunch of scholarships and stuff because I was decent in school. And combination of that, some grants, my parents' money, they helped me out.
Did you leave with a big debt or anything for college?
My dad, the one thing my father said to me was like, I'm not going to saddle you with debt coming out of college. So we're going to pay what we can, and you take care of the grants and loans and stuff. Not grants and scholarships. Arranged that on my own, and then they paid a portion. And I came out of school with no debt because he was like, we're going to take care of this. You know, they weren't paying, you know, not how school costs now, right? They're probably paying like $5,000 a year.
But
it was significant money. It was $5,000 a year for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they took care of it.
And they did that. That's beautiful.
Yep. So I was very fortunate that way. And I came on JET program after that.
Oh, that's right, because you wanted to come here. Is that when you started studying Japanese?
I studied Japanese during my second year at Marquette, and went through. And my instructor said the only way you become fluent is if you live in Japan. It's not Spanish. It's not Mandarin. You can't live in different places and learn. You gotta live in Japan. And so I applied for the JET program and came here.
What year was that?
That was 1997 when I applied. I graduated and I came here in '98.
All right. And where'd you go?
I was in Miyagi.
Prefecture.
In Miyagi Prefecture in a place called Kesennuma. Kesennuma is one of the cities that was affected by the tsunami.
Right.
But it's on the ocean, about 3 hours north of Sendai by car in those days because they didn't have a bypass. But it was great because we lived on the ocean, so in the summertime when we had off from school, we would be at the beach doing bonfires and things like that.
Were you the only how many foreigners did you have with you?
Oh, there were 10 people in my county, so we had a tight group.
Oh, really?
Oh, we had a tight group.
And you guys partied every weekend?
Every weekend, and we all drove.
Okay.
And so we would like.
Oh, you guys all had your own
We all had cars, yeah.
The Kinjido show?
No, we had real cars. You know, we had real cars. You know, that had the white license plate, not the yellow one. Come on now. One dude did, but But the summertime we go to the beach because we all lived on the ocean side, and then in the wintertime you're 2 hours away from the hills. So I snowboard. I skied initially.
Okay.
And then I moved into snowboarding.
You learned how to do that here?
I skied in the U.S.
Okay, so
I used to go to Wisconsin to a hill.
Right.
Yeah, but coming here I went to snowboarding because all the girls. The cute girls are snowboarding.
Is that right?
Yeah, all the older guys and stuff were skiing back in the late '90s, and I'm like, I'm going to snowboard, and so I did that, and I've been snowboarding ever since.
Okay.
But spent 3 years there, and then moved down to Tokyo after that for a couple of years. So I've done a lot, man. It's.
So when you were there, you're teaching English, of course.
Yep.
When you finished that, how'd you get into the business that you're doing now? So when you left there, you finished your how many 2 years? How many years did they give you in the JET program?
I did 3. I did the
3
full
years.
3.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what'd you do? You had to go back to the States?
I came down to Tokyo for a couple of years, worked here for a bit.
You mean right out of the JET program?
Right out of the JET program, I came down to Tokyo.
To do what?
I worked at GABA, the Eikaiwa school.
Okay, right, okay.
In HR.
Right.
So I worked at HR where I was hiring teachers and
okay, so you didn't have to be the teacher.
I'd have that, no. And then
the comptroller, yeah.
Exactly. So I was doing a lot of it was HR, but we did some hiring. We also did scheduling and a few other different things, interviewing and stuff. Right. So it was an interesting experience. And then I moved into corporate training at another company where we taught Microsoft employees, Boston Scientific, a lot of big companies.
You'd already learned, but you said you taught Microsoft?
We taught them English and how to.
Oh, you taught them English?
Yes, okay. how to in English, because for Microsoft, they had to report back to Washington, to Seattle, to Redmond, their headquarters. And a lot of folks here couldn't speak English well, or they couldn't hold their own in a meeting with foreigners.
Okay.
With non-Japanese, because you have Chinese people in there who are very outgoing and gregarious. Same with Americans and stuff, and Indian contingent as well. So the Japanese people were at a disadvantage. So they were like, we need to learn how to communicate and hold our own in these meetings.
Right.
So I taught the teams that did Xbox. A lot of folks who were very senior in their headquarters when it was in Shinjuku, and then went to the U.S. after that. After a couple of years of doing that here.
When did you find yourself dealing with culture shock? And what side did you feel the most culture shock? Was it being here in Japan, or was it going back to the States?
Not here in Japan.
You never felt it here?
You feel it in certain degrees. I think it's a spectrum, right? Okay. And I didn't feel it as hard as some other people do. And the way I'll say this, and it might sound funny, a lot of my white friends who came here from the U.S. or from, let's say, Western Europe or the U.K. did not know how to act as being a minority. They did not know what it felt like.
Being another.
Being another, yeah. Being a minority here, right? Because they did not.
First time in their life.
The first time in their life, everybody's staring at you. Or you're the only you in a meeting room or something like that, or in a hall.
And you're not the top dog.
No.
At all.
And I'm used to being the only black dude someplace or whatever, and I've acted accordingly. Some people did, not saying everybody did. I had culture shock for certain things, and obviously you still have microaggressions and things even today in Tokyo or in my life now. But going back to the U.S., the first few years we moved to San Francisco, and it was tough.
This is after you're married now?
I got married here, and then.
How long were you here before you got married?
I was here, so I got married on my fifth year here.
Oh, fifth year here.
Yes.
How long had you known your wife before you got married?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
So we lived together.
All right.
And then we wanted to move to the U.S., and she was like, I don't want to go as your fiance or girlfriend. I want to go as your wife.
That's what I'm talking about.
And so she proposed to me, and I said yes. And I did propose properly after. But yeah, we got married and went to the U.S. and went to San Francisco. But it was hard being there because San Francisco, the job market was tough. Even in 2003 when I went.
She couldn't get a job either?
She got a job because she worked for a Japanese recruiting firm, or a recruiting firm that was based there that recruited for Japan.
Okay.
And so she was doing Japan hours.
Okay.
And for IT. And she's been in recruiting for most of her career after that, right? For me, like, I didn't really have any skills. I'd been like working a jet program, I'd done corporate training, and so it was hard to find a decent job. And those 4 years we lived there were quite tough, in terms of financials. When you're married, if you don't have money right, then you're arguing about everything else.
That's right.
You know what I mean? We had a great friend group and everything, but it was tough, man. We lived there for 4 years. Loved California. I miss living there because of the weather.
The weather's what makes California nice.
You're a California guy as well. Right. I love North Cal and SoCal a lot.
Right.
And then we moved to Chicago, where my family was. And I joined a company called Mintel, which is a market research company, in 2007. There, and worked there for 3 years. And the CEO tapped me to come back here and run their account management team in Tokyo because they were having issues here. And after that, I haven't looked back since. So I came back here in 2010. And I've been in Japan since then, and I've worked at a few different market research related organizations. And then most recently this year, well, actually it's July now, so last month I decided to go out on my own.
So you're on your own now?
I'm on my own now, yes.
Excuse me.
I have a long career working with big companies, small companies, whatever, but in market research or in business intelligence. And I have a huge network, and most people of our age group do now, right? And the best thing to do now is to leverage your network. And so for me, I've always been the guy that's given up my contacts or information for free. And people are like, hey, Nick, somebody can do this. Do you know this guy? Can you introduce me? No problem. I never got paid on it. So now I'm like, I need to be using my contacts, and I need to not have my hand out the whole time and try to stick people up, but it's more like monetize my connections and those introductions and things to make sure that everybody's happy.
Because the thing is this, that's right. It's not just having the connections. You know how to make those connections help them get what they want, so they can produce more. So it's a win-win-win situation.
But now is the time, and there's something that clicked in my head, like a switch flipped and said, you know what, do this. It's gonna be tough. Thank God for Megumi being supportive partner that she is and allowing me to do this. But now I'm basically, my company's called NikuDera. NikuDera, and it's Meat Temple, the direct translation. The reason being is that my name is Nick.
Right.
And it sounds like meat, Niku. Okay. My friends in northern Japan gave me that nickname when I first came. They called me Nikuman or Nikuman, yeah. And then Tera is temple. It sounds like Taylor, my last name. Right. So NikuDera. Play on words.
Nice word.
So, meat, temple. Meat, in terms of meat, for me in my business, in my relationships, I always try to get to the meat of the problem, the meat of relationship, to drill down, ask questions, to see what people really are after.
Yes.
Because everybody says something, but they have a thought bubble above their head, and you don't know what they actually really want.
That's very good.
So meat. Temple, I think people's relationships with me, my relationship with them, are sacrosanct. I treasure my friendships. I love people. When you work with me, it's a safe space. You can tell me whatever you want. We're going to work something out together. And that's the way I basically sell NikuDera, in that my job is to actually help you solve your business problems. I might not be able to do it myself, but I know someone that's maybe 1 or 2 degrees away from me that can.
That's all it takes.
And that's the whole thing. And so right now I'm working on a few different little projects with people. A couple things might come to fruition, which is great. We are a group of consultants.
Okay.
Right? Me being the face of this business. But more importantly, it's not me doing all the work. There's certain things I can do. I'm not a market researcher, but I understand market research. I can explain how things work, what you should do. I can sell. I can tell stories. But my network is full of people who are way better than me at a lot of different things. So I have friends who are very smart in terms of financial services. I have friends who are brilliant researchers. I have friends who are fantastic producers in terms of audiovisual. So when people come to me and say, hey, do you know somebody can do this, or can you do this? I'll think, and I'll always say no if I can't, because I'm not going to just string people along just to try to make a buck. But I say, hey, maybe I can't, but I know someone who can.
Before I end the podcast, I always ask this question. If you could go back in time and meet the younger Nick and give him advice, how old would he be, and what advice would you give him?
I think the younger Nick would be 19 or 20. And I would give him 2 pieces of advice. Number 1, it's gonna be okay. Is one piece. The second piece of advice would be save your money. That's it.
That sounds like good advice to me, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.